So, dear guests, welcome to our regular seminar series. Today we have an esteemed guest among us who was kind to accept our invitation to give a seminar, Dr. Bilal Bağış. He is, for some of you may know, for those who doesn't, he is currently working at Fatih Sultan Mehmet University, and he's in the field of economics and international relations. He has a different backgrounds. He has education from both in Turkey and from the abroad. So he has a number of publications in his own topics, which are well known. And today he will deliver us a topic: economic connectivity and integration in the Turkic world. So without further ado, Bilal Hocam, floor is yours.
Thank you, Cengiz Hocam. Thanks for having me. And I'm really happy to be one of the leading research centers in Central Asia and broader Eurasia. And I'm also happy to see many familiar faces long after the FA Congress that we had last year. So I'll be talking about, as you just mentioned, the economic connectivity issues and integration in the broader Turkic world. So the shifts in geopolitics, economic equations, they are, of course, leading to new challenges as well as the opportunities for increased cooperation in all corners of the world, actually. The pandemic, wars, geopolitical tensions from Ukraine to the Middle East, they has all actually led to the quest for novel alternatives, new alternatives. And here I will try to provide an economic macro and global perspective rather on the Turkic world, of course. So here is our outline. So we aim to understand the geopolitical, geoeconomic, and geostrategic importance and potential of Turkey and the Turkic world and their place in global economy. And I will be providing a rather Turkey-centric perspective. So so we have some figures about the projections regarding the global trade in general. So part of the slides, they may have some Turkish explanations as well, because most of us are familiar with Turkish expressions, I'm guessing. So nowadays, around maybe over 15 billion tons of global trade is expected to almost double in the next 5 years and reach to about 100 billion tons by 2050, and again increase by another 50% 50 years after that by 2100. So global trade volume projections that are presented here, they're all actually pointing to creation of new connectivity routes, new transit or trade routes, and they're actually contributing a lot to all these equations or dynamics that we are talking about here. And the Turkic world, I would say, has a rather central position in all these whole new trade and connectivity dynamics. So let me provide a maybe bigger picture to understand these dynamics, the global perspective we are talking about. So the global trade figure here, it's representing the post-World War II world trade volume. And here we see, of course, a rising trend, but in particular, after 1990s and starting with the early 2000s, we have a significant acceleration in global trade figures here. And more specifically, so this data is from the World Trade Organization and World Bank data. And post 2000 is eye-catching in particular. And more specifically, if we look at the region that we will be focusing on, the Central Asia or the broader Turkic world. So here, as we see, the third group of numbers here, Middle East and Central Asia region, we see that the growth projections, they're also pointing to a rather increasing trend in real economic growth compared to the other regions. So as you see, mostly there is some kind of volatility or sometimes even a deceleration or decreases in economic growth in different parts of the world. But Central Asia in particular, it has really huge potential. And we see this from the latest IMF publication, the Global Outlook. And that also shows a relatively rising trend here. So this is very, very significant, I would say. So we have to keep this picture in mind. And let me actually talk about, so these are positive things, but also talk about some negativities in the global perspective as well. Here we have an index of global trade-wise uncertainty by Caldera et al. 2020 and the World Bank data again. So this picture and the index here, it's pointing to a rising uncertainties in global trade equations. And this is actually directly related to, we should recall the April 2025 Trump tariff levies, right? And as we see here, especially in 2025, this index of uncertainties trade-wise, it has gone much higher than even the maximum point in the previous 50 years. So a lot of uncertainties, a lot of risk factors, and accompanying opportunities as well, we have to mention. So these pictures, all they are actually pointing to the worldwide rising multipolarity or multilateralism. I'll try to explain it later on. But in this new era of rising uncertainties, as we just saw in that rising index, the multipolarity and multilateralism, they're turning into new realities or the new normals of the global economy as well as global ecopolitics. And here we have a graphical representation of maybe in a way the changing bilateral, multilateral trade relations, trade dynamics. Especially if you check the 1995 figure first, this is basically a very simple representation of, I would say, the famous Bretton Woods model, right? So on one side, you should remember we have the US in the center, and then we had Japan and Europe that were supporting the US economy, and dollar's central role, of course. So Japan and in Europe, especially Germany, they were leading economies of the world, and most of the trade, it was actually circulating around these three centers around the globe. And this is a figure by Alamsha, Ramandi, and Muliani. A very interesting representation to see the global picture and also the changes or the changing dynamics of the global trade relations. So this is 1995, and let's check 2021, post-pandemic era. So the trade connectivity in 2021, on the other hand, as we see from this picture, it's actually pointing to much higher and rising multipolarity and multilateralism. So a lot of diversification in economic relations, in trade-wise relations, and most probably the related political relations as well. And each of the color here, we should keep in mind that it's representing separate group or clusters, right? And rise of China here, Russian Federation, South Asian economies like India, even inside the Europe. So you should check a rise of France, Italy, Netherlands, the United Kingdom, and other parts of the world. There's a lot of activity going on in especially South America. So overall, we have this rising multipolarity, multilateralism, and much more complicated economic and trade-wise relations. So new players, a lot of new players have joined in, and this is actually creating, if you like, a new Bretton Woods, like Bretton Woods 2, or you may even call it Bretton Woods 3. So new players have joined it, and the calculations and equations, they have actually diversified and became much more complicated. And here we have yet another representation of this global connectivity or trade relations or rising multipolarity. So the trade connections, as is clear from here as well, and the bilateral, multilateral connectivity, it is rising in really high rates or accelerations. And we see again the same comparison between mid to 1990s and the post-pandemic era. So it is very, very clear how much complexity and rising connectivity we have evolved into. So we have overall these rising uncertainties. We have rising multipolarity for the whole world economy and multilateralism, rising trade-wise, economic-wise relations between all world economies. And in the center of all these relations, and we'll talk about a lot of historical reasons as well, I would say lies the Turkic world. So the Turkic world and the OTS, Organization of Turkic States, it is shaping up and repositioning itself in this new era of uncertainties, multipolarity, and multilateralism. And it's trying to accommodate to this new reality or new normal, representing a new moment of creation, I would call it. And our goal, of course, is to understand these regions, the Turkic world's potential, and discuss many means or ways to increase connectivity and cooperation here. So the argument of this presentation is basically talk a little bit about the potential, but also try to understand the path the Turkic world is planning to take. So further economic cooperation for sure, but we have to understand whether it's also trying to create some type of multilateral cooperation without some proper institutionalization. When we talk about institutions, of course, we have to remember the contributions from Acemoğlu, Robinson, Johnson, and their focus or emphasis on the quality institutions and how important they are for economic growth, even inclusive growth, right? So how will it shape up? And will it be, for example, something like or a new form of Francophone League or the Commonwealth of the British, etc. So a lot of cooperation issues talked about nowadays, integration, joint ventures, and once achieved, of course, my argument will be the OTS and the Turkic world in general, it could be a leading international organization, and the Turkic world will prosper, of course. And the goal is, of course, trade and economic relations first and foremost, but whether it will lead to some form of economic and political integration, a question mark there, and we have to wait and see or understand that part. But especially for Turkey, the Turkic world and the OTS, it could actually potentially be a primary driver of its Turkish century vision and a lot of macro goals that we have for especially the 2028, the latest five-year growth plan. And for other regional economies, for the rest of Turkish world, probably it's more about to complete their transition to market economy from the earlier state-controlled planned economies. And the Turkic world, on the other hand, it represents an historical and geographic region, very rich culturally, geographically, and it has huge closer and deeper cooperation potential. We have to underline that. And in terms of the type of relations, economic, logistic-wise, transportation, tourism, education, technology, even international relations, there are a few areas that are more frequently brought up in type of relations that have to be developed. So the Turkic world and the OTS, as we saw a few slides earlier, it just looks something like this. And a little more about its potential. So we have to really understand that region very well. It was the Central Asia and the region that the Turkic world is centered. It was center of probably one of the first globalization trends. Think about the Silk Road and the East-West trade connectivity and the Mongols, the type of transportation and communication networks they were creating, and the huge potential about not just the geostrategic or geopolitical position, but also about the energy and natural resources that they have, oil and mineral rare metals that they have, the agricultural potential that most of the countries have, their strategic location, its transit region, including inside the famous Belt and Road Initiative. And relatively small economic integration we have to underline, but of course, huge historic and cultural ties. Those are huge pluses. And today, energy, trade, and economic connectivity potential, they are enormous. And the east-west, south-north connectivity, they all point to the huge potential that Central Asia and the Turkic world in general, they have. And there are, of course, a lot of initiatives, a lot of new initiatives to benefit from this potential, starting with the Belt and Road Initiative and the related middle corridor that we see here, the middle corridor, that part of Belt Road Initiative, rising from Chinese production hubs and port cities all the way via the OTS member countries to Turkey and then to Europe. So this is a very, very strategic transit and trade corridor that is also helping utilize the huge potential that the Turkic world currently has. But not just this type of connectivity projects, and some other, we should say, outsider projects like the North-South Transport Corridor, built mainly by the Russians and Iranians. This is another example of numerous new initiatives to benefit from the regional potential. It's of course relatively new but passive, haven't been activated. And as we see, if we had regional stability, it would actually be probably more efficient than the standard routes, the blue line that is crossing through the Red Sea, the Mediterranean Sea, and then to Europe. But many other new projects, even some complementary and alternative initiatives, they're also coming up every now and then. And recently, relatively famous new project, the IMEC, this is actually also complementing the earlier Belt Road Initiative and the middle corridors that we talked about, in a way complementing that project, connecting India, Middle East, and to the Europe. But there are a lot of reasons to talk about negative or weaknesses, negative sides or weaknesses of this project compared to many other projects that Turkey has recently been bringing up or working on, and we'll talk about those details again. So we have a lot of corridor and connectivity projects going on, especially around the Turkic world and OTS member economies. And they are trying to enhance and increase the connectivity and integration between East and West, and including the Turkic world, of course. So here we see some of these ongoing projects, and they're all pointing to this rising and realized potential of the Turkic world. Even if you look at broader Eurasia or the Middle East, we see many other similar projects going on. This has actually, in a way, turned into a new era of corridor wars in global geopolitics. So we see a lot of examples here from South Asia to Northern Asia to Middle East, and many others connecting even Africa to these regions, and even stretching to all the way to South America. So why do we have all these connectivity and new projects, corridors going on, especially around the Turkish world? So we have to understand this region much better, of course. The region, the OTS or the Turkic world, or the official members of the Turkic world, they represent an economic weight of about 2 trillion US dollar in nominal terms. And in PPP, purchasing power parity terms, it corresponds to almost a 5 trillion US dollar. And Turkey alone is, of course, over 3 trillion US dollar economy nowadays. In nominal terms, it's almost 1.5 trillion US dollars. So most of this economic weight is coming from Turkey. The trade turnover is estimated at 1.2 trillion US dollar, but if you look at the ongoing trade, which is about $40 billion, this is another good representation of how the current potential is very, very limitedly benefited or utilized. So we're not using the whole potential that the region or the Turkic world in general has. And Turkey especially has a really huge role to play in all these equations. The population is about 180 million people, and the region is very, very broad, actually. If you consider the likes of Kazakhstan and Turkey, which are relatively bigger. And on average, the growth rates are also relatively healthier compared to other parts of the world. On average, about 5% real growth rate. And these are all, of course, rounded figures. And they're also pointing to increasing weight of Turkey, this region and also in the global economy. And it's on its way to be one of the 10 biggest economies. So another representation of its place in the Turkic world, in the global picture, we should say. So the Turkic world in general is well placed in the global picture. It really is representing a huge potential, as is clear from here as well. The GDP figures may be relatively weaker, but population-wise, growth rate-wise, area, and the trade potential compared to the utilization, they're all pointing to really huge potential we have to underline. And more specifically, if you go into the details, so in terms of how to utilize the potential that this region has, so you have to understand the country-wise or country-specific potentials or the comparative advantage that these countries have. Turkey and Hungary, for example, they have really strong manufacturing sectors. And Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, they are energy and natural resource rich countries. Turkmenistan and Uzbekistan, natural gas rich. Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, their young labor force and human capital. And even if you go into other details like the agricultural production potential, Turkey, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, they have a really huge real production and as well as its potential. The wheat and cotton production, especially in Central Asia, it is a significant aspect to dig into, to talk about. So the Central Asian economies in general, another aspect, they are relatively transition economies, though they have a really huge potential. And their souring relations with Russia, public skepticism towards China and the Chinese influence in that region, and sometimes even the discontent regarding being a new battlefield or playground for China or the Chinese-Russian influence. For the US, of course, they still need to improve their image in that region from where I see. But the region definitely does provide a new window of opportunity and also a new place or battlefield for maybe the Chinese and Russian challenge to the US-ruled international political, economic, and security order, which also actually has a huge question mark nowadays, especially after the new Trump administration in the US. A lot of questions about that, but still a global reality, so we have to underline. And in terms of how to increase this or enhance this commonwealth, a lot of projects going on. I did show the graphical representations or figures for some of them. The Belt and Road Initiative from east to west, also including a lot of regional infrastructure projects from South Asia to Central Asia, the railway, land, and partly the sea routes through the Caspian Sea, for example. And new initiatives in that region like BRICS, and a lot of members of G20 are also from this region. They are increasing the potential of the region and also helping utilize that potential. The Middle Corridor or the Trans-Caspian International Transport Route is another huge project going on, part of the Belt and Road Initiative, but increasing the potential of the region. EU's global gateway strategy and its connections, its finances, funding towards the OTS members or the Turkic World, it's another actually positive thing to talk about and to think about looking forward in terms of helping improve this or helping utilize that potential. The Trump corridor or the Trump route for international peace and prosperity, the earlier Zengezur corridor, or still Zengezur corridor for us. So these are all helping improve that potential. And Turkey's distant countries strategy, Asia and EU strategy, its active partnerships in ECO and the development road projects. These are some of the projects going on the Turkish side. And again, trying to better connect with the rest of the Turkic world and to help create or enhance that commonwealth of the region. The Economic Cooperation Organization that we just mentioned, that Turkey is also part of. Actually, most of the Turkic world, OTS members, they're also part of Economic Cooperation Organization, a long-standing regional cooperation organization. This has actually also helped the regional economies to increase economic integration for decades. And recently, independent Turkish states, they have also been member of this organization. The connectivity diplomacy, on the other hand, it is going on, still going on, and a lot of activity or dynamism on that side. So in terms of what, for example, Turkey could provide to rest of the Turkic world. If we are talking about connectivity, diplomacy, and international or bilateral, multilateral relations, Turkey is especially in a strategic location that could provide a maritime connection to the rest of the Turkic world or the OTS members. So they don't have any maritime borders. So in addition to railway and land connections, Turkey could also provide these really huge and strategic maritime connections. And the BRI and Turkey connections, they will matter as well. So Turkey, even currently, if we don't consider the Turkic world, it's still a very critical country connecting east to the west. But for the Turkic world especially, the maritime connections, they are very, very critical, and still about 80 to 90% of global trade, we should not forget, is still going through the maritime lines. So here we see all these sea routes across different continents, different parts of the world. And most countries are up to 80 to 90% of the trade. They're benefiting from these sea routes or maritime connections. So Turkey's connections to the West and also to sea routes, they will be mattering enormously for the rest of the Turkic world as well. More specifically, the OTS and the Turkic world recently, it has been working on new customs regulations to increase this connectivity or integration among the Turkic world economies. And other projects like the Trans-Caspian Fiber Optic Project, the Digital Economic Cooperation Deal, the Turan Special Economic Zone projects, new Turkish Investment Fund. So this type of special financial capital-wise projects, I think they will, in the short term, matter much more. So having some type of financial capital to fund different projects will be very critical. And even the Turkish oppositions, Turkish road projects, they're basically representing the huge potential as well as interest in utilizing the potential in the Turkic world. And we have, in terms of corridor diplomacy, fast approaching, newly built, a lot of ongoing projects, especially if you look at this gray area of the Turkic world, especially connecting this region to each other and also increasing its role in East-West connectivity. And a lot of energy corridors also going on, increasing energy diplomacy from the Turkic world to the rest of the world, and also increasing Turkey's role in this connectivity. We have, of course, some other newly announced natural gas pipelines from Russia to China and other parts of the world, but mostly these projects, they are going from Central Asia and the Turkic world to Europe, and a lot of times, again, over the Turkish borders to rest of the world. So Turkey has recently has become a new energy hub for the oil transport, for natural gas, and even recently in other parts of the energy equations, like in nuclear energy equations, renewables. So Turkey is indeed a newly rising energy hub for all these equations. And this is, of course, another aspect of increased connectivity inside the Turkic world, and also a way to improve this commonwealth of the whole Turkic world. But if you look at this whole project going on, especially the most famous one, the Belt and Road Initiative, which had the North Corridors, South Corridor, Middle Corridors, the sea routes. And if you look at the current geopolitics or the tensions going on all different parts of the world, from north to south to Middle East. We have actually today almost only the middle corridor that is left to focus on. And out of all these east-west connectivity projects, a lot of geopolitical risks, wars, tensions, they have led to much more increasing popularity and importance of the middle corridor. If you look at the North Corridor, for example, the war in Ukraine, it has mostly damaged that corridor. The South Corridor, the Red Sea tension going on there in the Indian Ocean, and other sea routes, they have a lot of pirate activities and other regional tensions that are decreasing their popularity. And the only safe route that has left is almost the middle corridor and the middle route of the Belt Road Initiative. And that's actually another huge plus for the Turkic world and for Turkey. So here we see that middle corridor going through Central Asia, the Turkic world, and the rising importance of the middle corridor and the Turkic world, it's a new reality. All the way from the Chinese production hubs, Chinese ports, via the Turkish world, and all the way through Turkey and to Europe. So this new reality, it is something to maybe focus more on and to benefit more from. The Zangezur corridor, or the newly renamed or relabeled corridor, the Trump route for international peace prosperity. So that's another critical route or corridor connecting the Turkish world to each other, and also from that connection, connecting east to the west, of course. So that very short connectivity route, the 43-kilometer long corridor, it is actually a new critical connection inside the Turkic world, and also connecting east to the west. So for example, Europe, Caucasia, Asia transportation corridor, this is also actually Turkic world centered, and relatively old projects still going on, but focusing predominantly on the Turkic world again. And other projects like the Central Asia Regional Economic Cooperation Program, relatively internal connectivity inside the Turkic world. But again, by increasing that infrastructure inside the Turkic world, it is expected to contribute to the commonwealth of this whole Central Asian and Asian economies, and also to the global economy as well. Turkey has also been working on the development road. So we should recall earlier slides that I was connecting this project to the Belt and Road Initiative. This is actually complementing the bigger east-west connectivity. It's very, very interesting, actually, connecting the Gulf region with the Europe over the Turkish borders, land and railway connectivity mostly. And this is the development road is very interesting, and we have to compare it with, of course, the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor that was brought up last year. And comparing the two, especially if you look at the India, Middle East economic corridor, which has sea routes, land, and then sea routes again, and then goes back to land. The development road, it seems actually much better, much more efficient, and much more feasible. So in terms of efficiency to the new realities of this century, there is a lot of reason to focus more on development road project. As we see here from the red line going through Iraq to Turkey, and then from there all the way to Europe, to Northern Europe and to England. So we even a very, very simple comparison of these two connectivity projects or the routes, it clearly demonstrates that the projects that Turkey or the broader Turkic world are focusing on, they are usually making much more sense in terms of feasibility, efficiency, and other aspects. So Turkey is, of course, at the center of all these discussions, or the picture that we're providing about the Turkic world. There are a lot of reasons, of course, to think about that. So we talked about its size in GDP terms, for example, almost 60 to 70% of the whole economic activity is coming from Turkey alone. But also Turkey's close proximity and strong economic connections with the rest of the world, especially with the West, they are also increasing Turkey's importance. Its strong manufacturing industry, the defense, technology, transportation infrastructure, strong economic connections with the rest of the world, cheaper maritime routes, high human capital, dynamic economy. These are all increasing and also helping us understand the potential that is lying here. The increasing importance of Turkey as well. But currently, if you look at the current picture, Turkish trade figures, so here we have Turkish export figures, for example. If you look at the current distribution, we're mostly trading with Europe, over 40%. That ratio, of course, has gone down from 50 to 40%, but still a lot to do in that sense. And we're also trading with the rest of the Middle East, North Africa, and North America. So this picture is actually showing that we are trading predominantly with neighboring economies. They are really huge here in Turkish export figures. The faraway countries, broader Turkic world, Far East Asia, these are, or they should be, our new targets. And this is another way of looking at the potential that is lying in the Turkic world. So we will be helping them, and they will also be helping Turkey to reach faraway countries like Far East Asia, and also to better utilize this potential with the natural resource potential that these countries have, right? So these export figures, therefore, they are showing that we are doing actually right by focusing on the Turkic world or that region again, because we have to diversify our relations, trade relations. Turkey, very interestingly, with a mere 4-hour flight, it is providing access to almost 1.5 billion people and almost to 30 trillion US dollar market. So it has a very, very strategic location in all these equations or dynamics that we're talking about, even in this changing dynamics. So Turkey has to better utilize its potential, these huge markets lying around it, and not just focus on one region like EU or the Middle East, North Africa, but focus on broader Central Asia and the Balkans, and even using other distant countries and faraway countries to reach the rest of the world. To minimize the risks, that's a necessity looking forward. And these are very crucial because Turkey is targeting being among one of the 10 biggest economies. And it is currently, of course, the strongest regional economy, but to achieve the 500 billion export targets, being among the top 10 economies, over 20,000 per capita GDP. These targets, they won't be very easy, but with the help from the new regional connectivities and increasing connections with the rest of the Turkic world, they will be much easier. So why are we specifically focusing on Central Asia. So this focus on Central Asia, or all other parts of the world, they have their own reasons, but Central Asia in particular, that focus, this is first about isolation versus togetherness, the choice between the two. As the global uncertainties, they are rising, geopolitical risks and tensions. So we have to, each country, and especially Turkey, has to move very carefully and decide rationally and wisely between isolation and togetherness. And it has to well plan its export diversification strategy. And the recent three primary areas of focus, the North Africa, especially Horn of Africa, Turkic World, and Balkans. Turkey has to increase connections and connectivities with that part of the world, first of all, and institutionalizing the relations, the importance of the institutions. I'll not go over that again. Cemal and his colleagues, they have written a lot about that. And to increase strategic autonomy, the economic independence or autonomy is first. So you have to achieve some type of economic strength and autonomy first to be able to decide on your own in other aspects as well. So OTS and the Turkic world, it could be one of the primary drivers of our Turkish century focus as well, to help Turkey achieve its macro goals. So the chronic issues that we have in Turkey, like current account deficit, external finance needs, they're interrelated. And increasing its soft power, political influence, and to effectively use its human capital. So this focus on new regions, especially to the Turkic world and OTS, it will be very, very crucial to increase financial stability, economic stability. So we need more economic integration, greater cooperation in this whole region, and to increase the development and create stronger institutions. So that's the argument of this paper. And the Turkic world in general, I would say, is still deciding its path to take. Whether it want to be an economic union, whether it really want to create some multilateral cooperation and with very, very strong institutions, for example. That part is still to be clarified, it seems like. So further economic cooperation and integration, joint ventures. We talked about a lot of examples like the Turkish Investment Fund, etc., etc. These will help the OTS and the Turkic world create a leading international organization, an economic union. And other aspects of the integration, of course, they will be left to the countries to decide. But for Turkey, this region and the Turkic world, it has huge potential, and Turkey needs to create a better win-win relation with this region. The Turkic world, on the other hand, surely needs closer and deeper cooperation. It has huge potential, but probably needs to focus more on economic, logistics-wise, transportation, tourism, education, special technology, and much easier trade and international relations-wise, economic relations and connectivity, they have to be improved. That's a reality. And thank you for listening.